My name is Ethan, and I am 28 years old. For 3 solid, agonizing years, I funded every single aspect of my family's existence, right down to the paper towels in their bathrooms, the high-speed internet they used to browse social media, and the premium gas in their cars. I paid for their comfort while they treated me like the absolute dirt beneath their expensive shoes. I remember the exact moment it all shattered into a million unfixable pieces. We were sitting around the massive mahogany dining table in my parents' formal dining room. It was a table I had essentially paid to keep under a roof I was actively financing through my silent monthly transfers. My father, Arthur, holding a heavy crystal glass of single malt scotch that I had purchased for his birthday, looked me dead in the eye from across the table. He let out a sharp, dismissive laugh that echoed against the high ceilings. He turned to our extended family, who were all happily digesting the premium cuts of steak I had paid for, and he pointed his glass toward my older brother. He told them, "Here is the honest truth about my children. Julian here, he has what it takes. He possesses natural leadership. He has real ambition. He is a young man who understands the value of hard work." My father paused, taking a slow sip of his drink, before his gaze slid over to me. His eyes were cold and full of condescension. "But Ethan? Well, bless his heart, he certainly tries. But you know what they say, folks. You simply cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. He is never going to be as good as his brother. We just have to accept that." He humiliated me, publicly and ruthlessly, while his golden child son sat there silently, smiling modestly, taking absolute credit for my hard-earned salary and the financial stability I provided. But there was one massive, world-altering thing they did not know. I was not just some invisible, antisocial tech nerd playing games on a computer in his childhood bedroom. I was the silent majority investor who had just finalized the paperwork to acquire a controlling stake in the very real estate firm where my brother worked. And right now, as I speak to you today, my father is practically begging on his knees for forgiveness, and my brother is staring down the barrel of a harsh reality he never saw coming in a million years. Before I tell you exactly how I methodically dismantled their perfect little illusion, hit the like button if you believe that toxic family members need to be held accountable, no matter who they are or what blood you share. And please, let me know what city or state you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let us go back to the very beginning, to the roots of the invisible prison they built for me. You know that specific feeling when you are standing right in the middle of a crowded room, but everyone looks right through you like you are made of clear glass? That was my entire existence growing up in the shadow of Julian. Our house, a sprawling 2-story colonial in a wealthy suburb, was essentially a dedicated shrine to my older brother. He was 2 years older than me, incredibly handsome with a strong jawline, and he possessed this effortless, manipulative charm that adults absolutely devoured. Every single family dinner, every Thanksgiving gathering, every passing conversation in the hallway somehow circled back to Julian's magnificent achievements. If Julian managed to tie his shoes correctly or bring home a completely average grade, my parents acted like he had just cured a major global disease. Meanwhile, I was the resident ghost. While my parents were busy establishing and constantly discussing a massive, robust college fund for Julian, money they happily drained without a second thought when he predictably changed his major 3 times and partied his way through his early 20s. I was locked away in my small room. I was entirely self-taught. I spent my days and nights teaching myself complex coding languages, advanced software architecture, and the gritty, uncompromising realities of digital marketing and business management until 3 or 4 in the morning. My father would frequently walk past my bedroom door, see the bright blue glow of my dual monitors illuminating the dark room, and shake his head with absolute, palpable disgust. "Stop wasting your damn time with that computer nonsense," he would say, his voice dripping with condescending authority. "Why do you not go outside and do something useful with your life? Learn to shake a hand like your brother. Learn to look people in the eye. That is how you get ahead in the real world, Ethan. Not by hiding in the dark like a frightened animal." They had already decided my fate long before I even had a chance to speak for myself. Julian was the undisputed future CEO, the handsome heir apparent who would carry the family name into the stratosphere. I was the socially awkward, burdensome disappointment who would eventually need saving or subsidizing. The pattern of favoritism was so deeply ingrained in our family dynamic, so woven into the fabric of our daily lives, that challenging it felt like trying to reverse the tide of the ocean with your bare hands. It was an impossible, exhausting task, so I simply retreated further into my work. The financial manipulation, the slow bleeding of my resources, started innocently enough. I was 22 years old, working relentlessly on a highly complex piece of proprietary software I had developed entirely from scratch. I had just landed my first legitimate, legally binding licensing deal with a mid-sized tech firm based out of Seattle. The check I received was for a few $1,000s. It was not life-changing money, not enough to buy a mansion or retire, but to me it was absolute proof of concept. I was so incredibly proud of myself. I printed the confirmation email, holding the warm paper in my hands, and brought it down to the pristine, white marble kitchen, practically shaking with a mixture of nervous energy and excitement. My mother, Eleanor, was standing by the island, looking at the paper while casually stirring her morning coffee. She offered a tight, forced smile that barely reached her eyes, a masterclass in passive aggression. "Well, that is nice, Ethan," she said, her tone the exact same pitch you would use to praise a toddler for completing a messy finger painting. She took a slow sip of her coffee before letting the trap spring. "Since you are making some actual money now, maybe you could help out with the electric bill this month. It has been a bit unusually high lately, and with Julian trying so hard to save up for his new car, things are a little tight for us. Just this once, sweetie. It is only $87. It would show that you appreciate living here." I look back at that specific moment now, standing in that bright kitchen, and I want to reach through time and shake my younger self by the shoulders. But you have to understand the deeply rooted psychology of the designated scapegoat child. When you have been systematically starved of basic approval and parental affection for your entire life, you will gladly drink sand if someone tells you it is fresh water. I genuinely thought this was my golden chance. I thought that by paying that one electric bill, I was finally becoming a valued, respected, contributing member of the family unit. I transferred the $87 immediately from my banking app. I felt useful. For the very first time in my life, I felt seen by my mother. I did not realize, in my desperate naivety, that I had just swallowed the hook whole, and they were about to reel in my entire financial future. That $87 was not a contribution. It was the beginning of a 3-year financial prison sentence. I was buying an expensive ticket to a show where I was the only paying customer, and I was not even allowed to sit in the audience to watch. Just this once, seamlessly and effortlessly transformed into just this week. And just this week rapidly became a permanent, expected, and highly demanding routine. Exactly 2 weeks after I enthusiastically paid that initial electric bill, my mother approached me for the gas bill. The month after that, it was a demand to cover a massive grocery run because they were hosting a neighborhood dinner party. By the time I turned 24, the routine was set in absolute unyielding stone. On the first morning of every single month, my phone would buzz with a text message from my mother. It was never phrased as a polite question. It was an itemized, non-negotiable invoice. Electric, $110. High-speed internet, $85. HOA fees, $150. Premium groceries, $200. During this time, my software business was rapidly expanding beyond my wildest expectations. I was taking on major corporate clients, signing lucrative contracts, and pulling in a salary that far exceeded anything my parents or my golden child brother were making at their traditional corporate jobs. But instead of saving that money for my own house, or investing heavily in expanding my company's infrastructure, I was systematically funneling roughly $600 a month directly into my parents' joint bank account. When I finally gathered the courage to stand in the living room and ask my father why Julian, who was working a comfortable, well-paying marketing job at a highly successful local real estate agency, was not contributing a single dime to the household he also lived in, Arthur's face turned a violent shade of bright red. "You are living under my roof rent-free," Arthur barked, his voice booming as he stood up from his leather recliner to physically tower over me. a classic intimidation tactic. You eat the food from our refrigerator. You use our electricity to run those damn glowing computers all day and night. Julian has real-world expenses, Ethan. He has to commute to an actual office. He has to network with high-value clients. He has to wear tailored suits to command respect. You sit in your room in your pajamas. It makes perfect logistical and financial sense that you cover the utility overhead. It is the absolute least you can do for the family that shelters you. The logic was completely flawed and entirely self-serving, but the emotional manipulation was flawless in its execution. I was conditioned from birth to believe my work was not real work, that my money was somehow lesser than Julian's money. But the deepest wound, the one that truly began to fracture my soul and destroy my capacity to trust, came from outside the immediate family circle. I had been dating a woman named Sarah for 2 years. She was the one person I thought understood my relentless drive, my quiet ambition, and the deep, unspoken pain of living perpetually in Julian's overbearing shadow. I trusted her implicitly with my life and my secrets. I was preparing to launch a massive, highly anticipated update to my software platform, and knowing my mother was constantly snooping around my desk looking at my financial mail, I had transferred $10,000 of my hard-earned savings into a secure joint account I had opened with Sarah for our future. It was supposed to be the foundational down payment for our own place, our escape route. One Tuesday evening, the air thick with an unspoken tension, Sarah came over to my house. She refused to sit down on the edge of the bed. She stood by my bedroom door, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, looking at me with a sickening mixture of pity and deep exhaustion. "I cannot do this anymore, Ethan," she said, her voice cold and devoid of the warmth I had loved for 2 years. "I want a man with a real future, someone with actual, visible drive. Look at Julian, he just got a massive promotion at his firm. He is going places. He commands respect. You are just stuck. You are stuck in your childhood bedroom, paying your parents' utility bills like a trapped teenager. I need more than this." The breakup speech destroyed me, tearing a hole right through my chest. But the real, catastrophic betrayal hit the next morning. Hoping to sever all ties and secure my assets, I logged into our joint banking account to transfer my $10,000 back to my personal, secure business account. The digital numbers stared back at me, cold and unblinking. The balance was exactly 0. My heart completely stopped in my chest. A cold sweat broke out over my entire body. I called Sarah immediately, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the glass screen of the phone to my ear. "Sarah, where's the money? Where is the $10,000? She did not even have the basic human decency to sound guilty or apologetic. "Julian needed it," she said flatly, as if discussing the weather. "He was facing a potential, highly damaging lawsuit from a minor car accident he caused, and your parents were in an absolute panic about his professional reputation. They begged me to help him out since you were being so incredibly stubborn and greedy about your precious business capital. It is going to your family, Ethan. Stop being so intensely selfish. He will pay it back when his promotion bonus kicks in next quarter. My own girlfriend, my own money, handed over freely to the golden child to protect his flawless, manufactured reputation, all orchestrated by the manipulative whispers of my own parents." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring blankly at the beige wall of my room, feeling something fundamental and vital inside me permanently snap. The naive, eager-to-please boy who just wanted his mother to smile at him died in that room on that Tuesday morning. What replaced him was a man who was cold, hyper-calculating, and fully, terrifyingly wide awake to the reality of his situation. I did not confront them right away. I knew that fighting a war without absolute, undeniable leverage against a unified front of narcissists was a losing battle. I needed to see exactly how deep the rot of their delusion went. I got my definitive answer a month later during our annual, highly extravagant 4th of July barbecue. The backyard was packed to the brim with extended family, neighborhood friends, and Arthur's business associates. The heavy smell of grilled premium burgers and expensive cigars filled the humid summer air. I was sitting quietly by the glass patio table, nursing a single beer, completely ignored by the crowd, when the topic of the current economic climate and household finances came up in a loud circle of men. "It is absolutely brutal out there right now," my Uncle Robert said, taking a long sip of his iced drink and shaking his head. "Inflation is killing everyone's budget. It is hard to keep a household running these days." My father puffed his chest out, a wide, deeply proud smile spreading across his flushed face. "Well, let me tell you, we are incredibly blessed to have a son like Julian," Arthur announced loudly, ensuring his voice carried so the entire patio could hear his boast. "The boy has really stepped up to the plate. He handles the electric bill, the gas, the expensive HOA fees. He even chips in a significant amount for groceries every week. He is the true financial backbone of this household. A real man takes care of his family, and Julian is a real man." I froze in my chair. My blood ran ice cold. I had literally paid the electric and gas bills 2 days prior. The expensive cuts of grocery meat everyone was currently chewing on and complimenting had been paid for by a swipe of my debit card that very morning. I looked across the patio. Julian was leaning casually against the wooden railing, holding a craft beer, nodding modestly and offering humble smiles as people patted him aggressively on the back. He did not correct a single word of the lie. He soaked up the stolen praise, the stolen financial valor, like a dry sponge. But the most damning, heartbreaking part of the entire spectacle was Uncle Robert. He was standing right next to me. Just 10 minutes earlier, he had deliberately glanced over my shoulder when a bright push notification lit up my phone screen. "Payment successful. $150 to Oak Ridge HOA. He saw the notification. He knew exactly whose money was actively keeping this family afloat. I looked up at Uncle Robert. He caught my eye for a fraction of a second, immediately looked down at his expensive leather shoes, and took a slow, deliberate sip of his beer, choosing absolute silence. He chose to protect the comfortable lie over defending the uncomfortable truth. That was the exact moment the final blindfold fell from my eyes. I realized I was not just fighting my manipulative parents and my parasitic brother. I was fighting an entire family system, an entire network of enablers, dedicated entirely to maintaining an illusion at the direct expense of my life and my sanity. Later that same evening, after the last of the guests had finally driven home and the backyard was swallowed by the dark, quiet night, I found my mother in the kitchen. She was humming a cheerful tune, leisurely loading the expensive crystal glasses into the dishwasher. The anger I had been suppressing, pushing down into the pit of my stomach all day, was now vibrating visibly in my chest. "Why did Dad tell everyone on the patio that Julian pays the household bills?" I asked. My voice was dangerously calm, lacking any of the usual hesitant inflection I used when speaking to her. Eleanor did not even pause her rhythmic scrubbing. She let out a long, highly theatrical sigh, designed to show me how exhausting she found my very existence. "Ethan, please, do not start your unnecessary drama tonight. We had a lovely, successful day with the family. Do not ruin it with your mood swings." "I am not starting drama, Mom. I am asking a direct, factual question about a lie." I pushed, stepping closer to the marble counter so she could not ignore me. "I pay the electric bill every month. I pay the gas bill. I paid for the steaks you just cooked and served to 20 people. Why is Julian standing on the deck getting the credit for my money?" She finally turned to face me, slowly wiping her wet hands on a decorative kitchen towel. She deployed that patronizing, deeply condescending look she had perfected over 3 decades of parenting. "You are looking at this the entirely wrong way as usual," she said, her voice smooth and coated in poison. "Julian manages the public reputation of this family. He is the face of our success. When you give us money, you are simply contributing to the general household pot. Julian makes the executive decisions on how we present ourselves to the world. It is a partnership, Ethan. You provide the background support and he provides the leadership." "A partnership?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that scraped against my own throat. "I am funding his inheritance. I am actively subsidizing his lavish lifestyle, so he can pretend to be a big-shot executive while I get treated like a stray dog you occasionally throw scraps to. Keep your voice down right now, she hissed, her eyes darting nervously toward the hallway where Arthur was watching television. You should be eternally grateful we allow you to live here while you play your little games on your computer. Julian is building a real, tangible career. He needs the confidence boost right now. You have always been so intensely jealous of him, Ethan. It is ugly, and it is unbecoming of a grown man. The psychological gaslighting was absolutely masterful. Without missing a beat, she took the reality of my financial exploitation and effortlessly spun it into a twisted narrative of my own deep-seated jealousy. I turned on my heel and walked away without uttering another word. There was no point in arguing with a brick wall that was designed to crush you. The absolute climax of their shared delusion, the moment that pushed me past the point of no return, occurred 3 weeks later, at Arthur's highly anticipated 60th birthday dinner. I had been forced to pay for the entire evening in advance at the most high-end, exclusive steakhouse in the city. The final bill, including the vintage wine Arthur demanded, was north of $800. The whole family was there. Aunts in their finest dresses, uncles in tailored suits, cousins whispering across the white tablecloths. As the dessert plates were cleared away by silent waiters, Arthur stood up from the head of the table and tapped his crystal wine glass with a silver spoon. The loud chatter of the table immediately quieted down. He cleared his throat and launched into a sprawling, self-indulgent speech about the importance of family, the weight of legacy, and the value of hard work in modern America. And then, slowly, he turned his proud gaze directly to Julian, who was sitting to his right. I look at my eldest son tonight, Arthur said, his voice thick with fake, theatrical emotion that made the aunts dab their eyes. And I see the bright future of our name. I see a young man who truly understands duty. A man who financially stepped up to the plate and took charge when things got tight for this family. Julian, your generosity and your strength are inspiring. You are the son every man dreams of having. The entire table erupted into applause. Julian smiled a perfect, practiced smile and raised his expensive glass of wine, accepting the adoration for a financial sacrifice he had never made. Then, the room went quiet as Arthur looked across the table at me. The manufactured warmth instantly vanished from his eyes, replaced by that familiar, dismissive, heavy pity. And Ethan, well, you know what they say in the old country. You simply cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. But we love you anyway, son. We really do. Maybe one day you will finally find your footing in the world and be as good, as solid, as your brother. A wave of nervous, uncomfortable laughter rippled through the extended family. A few cousins looked away, suddenly intensely interested in their empty dessert plates. I sat there in my chair, my face carved from absolute stone. I did not flinch. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I just stared directly into my father's eyes, and then I slowly looked down at the $800 receipt sitting on the silver leather tray right next to his elbow. I was literally funding my own public execution. That night, I drove home in silence, walked past my parents watching television, returned to my room, and locked the heavy wooden door. I did not sleep a single wink. I opened my high-powered laptop and pulled up 3 entire years' worth of banking statements from every account I owned. I created a master, heavily encrypted spreadsheet. I went through the records line by excruciating line, transfer by agonizing transfer, bill by stolen bill. I documented every single electric bill, every sudden emergency cash transfer to cover Julian's mistakes, the weekly premium groceries, the exorbitant HOA fees, and that devastating, life-altering $10,000 they had manipulated Sarah into stealing to protect Julian from his own reckless lawsuit. By 4 in the morning, the harsh blue light of the monitor reflecting off my tired face, the final, undeniable tally glowed on my screen, $32,450. I had bled over $32,000 in cold, hard cash into this toxic family unit. I was the secret, highly efficient engine keeping their upper-middle-class illusion alive and breathing, while they publicly humiliated me at every possible turn to elevate a man who was essentially a well-dressed parasite. I minimized the spreadsheet and looked at the dashboard of my business accounts. My software company, run entirely by just me and my brilliant online partner Lucas, had recently secured a massive multi-year enterprise contract with a global logistics firm. My personal, liquid net worth had quietly, without anyone in this house knowing, crossed the $1 million mark 2 months ago. I had more money sitting in highly secure, high-yield liquid accounts than my father had managed to save in his entire lifetime of corporate middle management. The burning anger in my chest completely evaporated into the cool night air. What replaced it was a terrifying, crystal-clear, unshakable calm. The game was over. I was absolutely permanently done. The next morning was the 1st of the month, the day of the invoice. At exactly 8 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Eleanor. "Morning, Ethan. Hope you slept well. The electric is $140 this month. Gas is $60. Also, Julian's car desperately needs new brakes for his commute. So if you could add $300 to the transfer today, that would be a huge help to the family. Transfer the total by noon, please. Have a good day working on the computer." I lay in bed and stared at the glowing screen for a full silent minute. I didn't write a long, emotional paragraph explaining my deep feelings of betrayal. I didn't demand an apology or a family meeting. I typed 2 simple letters. No. I hit send. Then, moving with the precision of a surgeon, I opened my banking app, navigated deep into the security settings, and changed every single password to complex, randomized alphanumeric codes. I permanently deleted my linked checking accounts from their shared household utility portals. I locked down my entire financial world like an impenetrable military fortress. The Bank of Ethan was permanently, irrevocably closed for business. The fallout from that single 2-letter text message was instantaneous and completely explosive. Exactly 30 seconds after I hit send, I heard the heavy footsteps pounding down the hallway. My bedroom door flew open, hitting the wall with a violent crash. Arthur stood in the doorway, his face a mottled, terrifying shade of purple with pure rage, gripping his smartphone in his hand like a weapon. "What the hell is the meaning of this?" he roared, his voice shaking the framed pictures on my wall, as he aggressively shoved the glowing screen of his phone inches from my face. "What exactly do you mean? No?" I did not flinch. I slowly turned my chair away from my dual monitors. I calmly reached into the bottom drawer of my heavy oak desk and pulled out a massive, 3-inch thick black binder I had spent the early morning hours printing and organizing. I dropped it onto the center of the desk with a heavy, deeply satisfying thud that echoed in the quiet room. "I mean exactly what I typed." "No," I said, my voice completely flat, completely devoid of any of the fear or respect he was used to commanding. "No more covering the electric bills. No more paying the neighborhood HOA fees so you can pretend to be a big shot. No more subsidizing Julian's brake pads or his car insurance." Inside this binder is the meticulous, bank-verified documentation of the $32,450 I have spent out of my own pocket keeping this family financially afloat over the last 3 years. Arthur stared down at the thick black binder. For a fraction of a second, I saw genuine, unadulterated shock register in his eyes before his deeply ingrained narcissistic defense mechanisms kicked in to protect his ego. "This is your family," he screamed, spit flying from his lips. "You owe us. You owe us for raising you, for putting a roof over your ungrateful head." "I owe you absolutely nothing," I replied, standing up slowly so I was completely eye level with him, refusing to back down an inch. "You stood up at that expensive restaurant last night and told the entire extended family that Julian is the financial savior of this house. You looked me in the eye and called me a sow's ear in front of 30 people. So, let the magnificent silk purse pay the bills. From this exact second forward, your golden child Julian is entirely responsible for every single dime this house requires to function. You will not get another cent from my accounts." He raised his right hand, his fist clenched tight, as if he genuinely wanted to strike me across the face. But the absolute, dead, unflinching look in my eyes stopped him cold. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that he had no power here anymore. He spun around, his chest heaving, and slammed my bedroom door shut so hard the drywall above the frame visibly cracked. By noon that same day, the coordinated family smear campaign was in full, vicious swing. Narcissists simply cannot handle losing their grip on control, so they immediately pivot to trying to control how every single other person sees you. Aunt Clara, the family's premier, undisputed gossip queen, started calling all the relatives on the East Coast. The narrative they rapidly constructed and deployed was that I was suffering from a severe, dangerous mental breakdown, driven by a psychotic, deeply rooted jealousy over Julian's recent, highly celebrated promotion at the real estate firm. Eleanor, weaponizing her social media presence, took to Facebook. She posted a picturesque, sunset photo featuring a stylized Bible verse about honoring thy father and mother. Beneath it, she wrote a calculated caption. Going through a truly heartbreaking, agonizing season with one of our boys right now. Please keep our family in your prayers as we deal with his toxic rebellion, his sudden cruelty, and his refusal to participate in family love. We are so incredibly thankful for Julian's steady, strong, manly presence during this terrible storm. He is our rock. Mrs. Higgins, the neighborhood busybody who practically lived on her front porch, cornered me by the community mailboxes the very next morning. She put a sympathetic, condescending hand on my arm. I heard you are going through a really tough time right now, Ethan. Your mother is just beside herself with worry. Mental health is nothing to be ashamed of, dear. There are doctors who can help you manage your jealousy. I did not get angry. I just offered her a polite, terrifyingly calm smile. My mental health is absolutely fantastic, Mrs. Higgins. Never been better. But you might want to check on my parents' financial health when their electricity and water get shut off next week due to non-payment. I walked away without another word, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with her mouth hanging wide open in shock. I did not log onto Facebook to argue in the comment sections. I did not call the distant relatives to frantically defend my character or explain the binder. Silence is the most terrifying, effective weapon you can possibly use against people who thrive on chaotic drama and emotional reactions. I poured my energy entirely into my company. Lucas and I were quietly, methodically negotiating a massive, multi-million-dollar buyout of a struggling regional real estate agency, the exact, specific agency where Julian was currently strutting around the office like a king, entirely unaware that the ground beneath his feet was about to be bought by the brother he despised. A week later, the harsh financial reality began to truly crush my family's operating budget. Without my silent weekly infusions of cash, they were drowning. They deployed their most manipulative, emotionally devastating tactic yet, Grandma Rose. My phone rang on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. It was my 85-year-old grandmother. Her voice was thin, trembling, and laced with genuine, deep anxiety. "Ethan, sweetheart," she croaked into the phone, coughing slightly. "Your mother called me crying. She told me Julian is in terrible, terrible trouble. His car broke down completely, and she said he might lose his job if he cannot get to the office this week. She said you have the money in your account, but you are just being incredibly stubborn and trying to punish them. Could you please just give him the $400? Just do it for me, Ethan? I cannot sleep knowing the family is fighting like this." My stomach turned completely upside down. Eleanor, in her desperation to maintain the illusion and protect Julian's money, was actively using an 85-year-old woman on a fixed income to run her emotional extortion schemes. It was a new low even for her. "Grandma," I said, keeping my voice incredibly gentle but absolutely, immovably firm. "I love you very much, but Mom is lying to you to get what she wants. Julian makes a full, adult salary at a corporate job. If he does not have $400 in his bank account to fix his own car, it is because he mismanaged his money and spent it on himself. I am not his father, I am not his accountant, and I am definitely not his personal bank. Please tell Mom that if she ever uses you to ask me for money again, I will block her phone number permanently, and I will only communicate with you directly." There was a long, heavy pause on the line. I could hear the gears turning in her head as the reality of the situation clashed with the lies she had been fed. "Oh," Grandma Rose whispered, sounding deeply confused but realizing she had been unknowingly pushed into the middle of a vicious war zone. "Okay, sweetie. I did not know. I love you, Ethan." I hung up the phone, walked over to my bedroom window, and looked down at the driveway. Julian was outside in the harsh afternoon sun, violently kicking the front tire of his expensive, leased BMW, screaming red-faced into his cell phone, presumably arguing with a mechanic he could not afford to pay. He was finally, for the very first time in his 30 years of life, experiencing the cold, hard consequences of his own lifestyle. And the true, devastating storm had only just begun to gather on the horizon. I thought the worst of their manipulation was over. I was so incredibly wrong. The illusion they had built around my older brother was completely fragile, held together only by the constant, silent infusion of my cash. When I firmly shut the vault, the cracks in their perfect family portrait began to show almost immediately. But the true, undeniable extent of their financial desperation did not fully expose itself until the universe handed us a genuine medical emergency. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, roughly 2 months after I had officially stopped paying their bills. I was sitting in my home office, deeply engrossed in finalizing the legal framework for a massive corporate buyout with my business partner, Lucas. My phone vibrated on the desk. The caller ID flashed my father's name. I had ignored his previous calls, knowing they were usually just thinly veiled attempts to guilt-trip me into paying for Julian's car insurance or a sudden, mysterious household expense. But this time, he called 4 times in rapid succession. I finally picked up. "Ethan, you need to get to the hospital right now," Arthur said. His voice was not filled with its usual booming, arrogant authority. It was thin, reedy, and vibrating with genuine panic. "Your mother fell down the back stairs. She broke her wrist badly. We are at the emergency room at Memorial General. Ethan, they are demanding a $300 copay up front before they will schedule the orthopedic surgeon. And my credit cards are maxed out. Please." For a brief, fleeting moment, the thick wall of ice I had built around my heart cracked. This was not a manufactured crisis. This was not a manipulated sob story designed to fund Julian's lifestyle. My mother was genuinely hurt and sitting in a hospital waiting room. "I am on my way," I said, grabbing my car keys and walking out the door. When I arrived at the emergency room, the sterile smell of bleach and old coffee hit me instantly. I found Arthur sitting in a plastic chair, his face buried in his hands. Eleanor was on a gurney behind a curtain, heavily medicated and waiting for the specialist. Dr. Eris, a tired-looking emergency physician, was standing near the nurse's station reviewing her chart. I walked straight past my father and approached the billing desk. I handed the clerk my premium corporate credit card and paid the $300 copay without a second of hesitation. It was a medical emergency, and I was not a monster. But as I stood there waiting for the receipt, a deep, nagging question clawed at the back of my mind. My father made a very respectable salary. They lived in a paid-off house. Where was their massive emergency fund? Where was the financial safety net they always bragged about? I walked over to Arthur, holding the printed receipt in my hand. "The copay is handled. The surgeon will see her soon," I told him quietly. "But Dad, I need to ask you a serious question. Why are your credit cards completely maxed out? What happened to the emergency savings account you and Mom always talked about? The one you claimed Julian was so brilliant at managing?" Arthur refused to look me in the eye. He stared at the scuffed linoleum floor, his jaw clenching and unclenching. "Things have been incredibly tight lately, Ethan. You pulling your financial support really put us in a terrible bind. We had unexpected expenses." "What unexpected expenses?" I pressed, refusing to let him off the hook. "My contributions covered utilities and groceries. That should not drain a $20,000 emergency fund in 2 months." The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, Arthur let out a long, heavy breath that seemed to age him 10 years. "Julian had a problem," he whispered. his voice barely audible over the hum of the hospital monitors. He got involved in some high-stakes online sports betting. He thought he could double his salary and buy a new house. He lost everything. He was facing a massive lawsuit from a private creditor, and they were threatening to garnish his wages. Your mother and I had to drain the entire emergency fund to pay off his gambling debts so he would not lose his real estate job or go to jail. We have absolutely nothing left, Ethan. Nothing. I stood there in the harsh fluorescent light, processing the absolute magnitude of his confession. Julian, the golden child, the supposed financial genius, the silk purse, was a degenerate gambler who had secretly bankrupted our parents. And instead of holding him accountable, my parents had sacrificed their own medical safety net to protect his pristine, manufactured reputation. So, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper, you lied to the entire family. You humiliated me publicly. You demanded I pay your utility bills so you could secretly funnel your own money to save Julian from a lawsuit. You enabled a gambling addict while calling me a useless disappointment. Arthur finally looked up, his eyes pleading. He is your brother, Ethan. We have to protect family. And since you are here, the car is almost out of gas, and we have not eaten all day. Could you maybe give me $100 for gas and dinner? Just to get us through the night. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who had systematically destroyed my self-worth to build a throne for his oldest son. I paid the medical bill because Mom was in pain, I said, my voice completely dead. But gas money and dinner are not medical emergencies. Call the financial genius you drained your savings for. Let Julian buy you a sandwich. I turned my back on him and walked out of the sliding glass doors into the rain. I did not look back. You would think that a moment like that, a brutal exposure of the truth, would change the family dynamic. You would think it would force a massive reckoning. But narcissists do not reckon with reality. They simply double down on their delusions. 3 weeks later, I came home from a long day at the office. The moment I unlocked the front door, the rich smell of catered garlic butter and expensive roasted meats hit my nose. I walked into the dining room and froze. The table was extended, covered in a pristine white tablecloth. There were floral centerpieces, crystal glasses, and a massive banner hanging across the far wall that read, "Congratulations on the big promotion, Julian." The entire extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all dressed in their evening best, holding glasses of champagne. Arthur and Eleanor were standing by the fireplace, beaming with pride, despite the cast on my mother's arm. Julian was holding court in the center of the room, wearing a brand new, custom-tailored suit that he absolutely could not afford. I stood in the doorway, completely ignored, wearing my casual work clothes. Eleanor finally spotted me. Her smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. She hurried over to me, grabbing my elbow and attempting to physically steer me back into the hallway, away from the guests. "Ethan, what are you doing home so early?" she hissed under her breath. "I live here," I stated simply, pulling my arm out of her aggressive grip. "What is all this? A promotion party? Dad told me 3 weeks ago that Julian bankrupted you. How did you afford a catered dinner?" "Keep your voice down," she ordered, her eyes darting frantically toward the living room where Uncle Robert was laughing. "Julian got promoted to senior sales director today. It is a huge milestone for his career. We put the catering on a new credit card. He needs the celebration to boost his confidence after his recent struggles. We have to show the family that he is succeeding." Before I could even process the absolute insanity of going further into debt for a fake celebration, Arthur walked up behind my mother. He puffed out his chest, trying to project authority. "Ethan," Arthur said, his tone low and threatening, "we did not expect you home until later. Frankly, we think it would be best if you left the house for the evening. Go to a movie. Go to a diner. Find somewhere else to be tonight." I stared at him, genuinely wondering if he had lost his mind. "You are kicking me out of my own home? The home where I paid the utility bills for 3 years. We are asking you to respect a family celebration," Arthur countered smoothly. completely rewriting history in real time. This night is about Julian's massive success. Your negative energy, your constant jealousy, it brings the whole mood down. This is a private celebration for family members who actually support each other. You have made it clear you do not want to be part of this family's financial system, so you do not get to enjoy the celebrations. There it was, the final, undeniable verdict. My membership in this family was entirely conditional on my willingness to be a silent, exploited ATM. The moment I established a boundary, I was officially evicted from their hearts. Understood, I said quietly. The anger was completely gone. I felt nothing but a profound, liberating emptiness. Enjoy the catered food you cannot afford. I did not go to a movie. I walked straight up the stairs to my bedroom. I pulled 3 large suitcases from my closet. Over the next hour, while the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses echoed from the dining room directly below me, I methodically packed up 28 years of my life. I packed my clothes, my expensive computer equipment, my legal documents, and every single trace that I had ever existed in that room. I sat on the edge of my bare mattress and pulled out my phone. I dialed Lucas. He answered on the second ring. "Is the paperwork finalized?" I asked, my voice steady and cold. "Signed, sealed, and legally binding, Ethan," Lucas confirmed, the excitement evident in his voice. "We just successfully acquired the controlling stake in the Vanguard Real Estate Group. The entire board of directors reports to us now. You are officially the majority owner of the firm." "Perfect," I said. "I am moving into the downtown penthouse tonight. Send the movers for the rest of my furniture tomorrow." I grabbed my suitcases, walked down the back staircase to avoid the party, and loaded my car in the pouring rain. I left my house key on the kitchen counter next to a pile of unpaid utility bills. I drove away from the only home I had ever known, and for the first time in my entire life, I could finally breathe. The silence that followed my departure was deafening, but it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I settled into my luxury penthouse overlooking the city skyline, a stark contrast to the dark, cramped childhood bedroom I had occupied for nearly 3 decades. My business skyrocketed. Unburdened by the constant, draining emotional vampire of my family, I poured every ounce of my brilliant energy into expanding our newly acquired real estate portfolio and upgrading our software platforms. Meanwhile, the spectacular collapse of my family's financial illusion was playing out exactly as I had predicted. Without my monthly cash injections to hide their terrible habits, the reality of Julian's debts and my parents' massive overspending caught up with them violently. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from a highly gossipy Aunt Clara who suddenly wanted to check in on her favorite successful nephew, that Julian's credit cards were being sent to aggressive collection agencies. His magnificent promotion turned out to be a hollow title bump with barely any salary increase. A desperate move by his corrupt boss, Derek, to keep the sales team motivated. The absolute height of the pathetic aftermath arrived 6 months after I moved out in the form of a text message from Sarah, my treacherous ex-girlfriend. "Hey Ethan, I saw your new company profile in the business journal. You look amazing. I have been doing a lot of deep thinking lately. I realized I made a terrible, terrible mistake listening to your parents. Julian is a complete mess. He is drowning in debt, and he never paid me back a single dime of that $10,000. He is facing another lawsuit. I miss us. I miss your stability. Can we please get coffee and talk?" I sat on my expensive leather sofa, reading the message while drinking a cup of premium black coffee. I did not feel a shred of vindication. I just felt an overwhelming sense of pity for a woman who chased an illusion and ended up with a nightmare. I did not type a long response. I simply replied with a single thumbs-up emoji, and then I permanently blocked her number across every single platform. 2 full years passed. 2 years of absolute, unbroken silence between me and my parents. I had built an empire. I was wealthy beyond anything my father could have ever comprehended. And that brings us to the most defining, explosive night of my entire life. It was the annual Metropolitan Business and Real Estate Gala. It was the most exclusive, high-profile networking event in the state, attended by billionaires, venture capitalists, and the absolute elite of the corporate world. I was invited as a VIP guest. I pulled up to the grand entrance of the five-star hotel in a brand-new, midnight black Porsche 911. The valet immediately rushed over, opening the door with practiced reverence. I stepped out wearing a custom-tailored Tom Ford tuxedo that cost more than my father's first car. I handed the valet the keys, adjusted my cuffs, and walked into the grand ballroom. The room was a sea of glittering chandeliers, expensive champagne, and powerful people making massive deals in hushed tones. I grabbed a drink from a passing waiter and began scanning the room. It did not take long to spot them. Standing near the back of the room, hovering awkwardly by the buffet tables, were Arthur, Eleanor, and Julian. They looked completely out of place. Arthur was wearing an ill-fitting suit that looked 10 years old. Eleanor looked deeply stressed, the deep lines of financial worry carved permanently into her face. Julian looked incredibly nervous, sweating profusely under the bright ballroom lights. They were eagerly surrounding a man named Derek, the arrogant, aggressively loud regional manager of Vanguard Real Estate Group, Julian's boss. I knew exactly what was happening. Julian was likely on the verge of being fired due to terrible performance, and my parents had scraped together the money to buy tickets to this gala to corner Derek and beg for Julian's job. They were attempting to manufacture another miracle for the golden child. I took a slow sip of my drink and walked directly toward them. Arthur spotted me first. His eyes widened in absolute shock, taking in the tailored tuxedo, the expensive watch on my wrist, and the sheer, undeniable confidence radiating from my posture. But his ingrained need to dominate me overrode his common sense. He nudged Julian, and they all turned to face me. Well, Arthur sneered, looking me up and down with that same old dismissive pity, though it looked incredibly forced now. Look who decided to show up and play pretend with the big boys. Did you have to rent that suit, Ethan? Or did you finally manage to sell one of your little computer games? Eleanor chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. It is incredibly inappropriate for you to be here, Ethan. Julian is trying to network with his superiors. You are going to embarrass him in front of Derek. Please go stand somewhere else. Derek, a man with too much cologne and a predatory smile, looked at me and chuckled. This is the famous brother I hear so much about? The one who sits in his room all day. Listen, buddy, this event is for major players. Real estate moguls. You might want to head back to the basement before security asks to see your credentials. Julian smirked, finally finding his false courage. Yeah, Ethan, let the adults handle the business. I am up for a massive regional promotion, and we are celebrating with Derek tonight. I did not get angry. I did not raise my voice. I simply smiled, looking at each of them with complete and utter serenity. A promotion, Julian? That is incredibly fascinating. Because from what I understand, Vanguard Real Estate Group has missed its quarterly targets by 40%, and the entire regional management team is under severe internal audit for financial mismanagement. Derek's predatory smile instantly vanished. His face turned a sickly shade of pale gray. How the hell do you know about internal corporate audits? He demanded, his voice dropping an octave. Before I could answer, the crowd around us suddenly parted like the Red Sea. A hush fell over the immediate area. Approaching our small circle was Mr. Sterling, a legendary billionaire venture capitalist and the keynote speaker for the entire gala. He was a man who could destroy a career with a single phone call. Arthur's eyes lit up with desperate greed. He immediately shoved past me, extending his hand toward the billionaire with a sickeningly eager smile. Mr. Sterling, Arthur Hayes, it is an absolute honor. My son Julian here is one of the top rising stars in the Vanguard real estate portfolio, and we would love to discuss a potential. Mr. Sterling did not even look at Arthur. He smoothly walked right past my father's outstretched hand as if Arthur was entirely invisible. Mr. Sterling stopped directly in front of me. To the absolute, mind-breaking shock of my family, the billionaire offered a deep, respectful nod and extended his hand to me. Ethan, my boy, Mr. Sterling said, his booming voice carrying across the quieted room. "It is fantastic to finally see you in person. The board was absolutely blown away by your recent restructuring strategy." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Richard. The transition has been smooth." Mr. Sterling turned slightly, addressing the small crowd that had gathered to watch the interaction, his eyes landing squarely on a terrified Derek and my frozen family. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Sterling announced loudly, "I want to introduce you to the most brilliant mind in the room tonight. Meet Ethan Hayes. He is the founder of Apex Software Solutions, and as of last month, he is the new majority shareholder and silent owner of the entire Vanguard Real Estate Group. He essentially owns half the commercial property in this city." The silence that hit our circle was absolute. It was a physical, crushing weight. Arthur's jaw dropped so hard I thought it might unhinge. He looked from Mr. Sterling to me and back to Mr. Sterling, his brain completely unable to process the reality that the son he called a sow's ear was now a titan of industry. Eleanor physically staggered backward, bumping into a cocktail table, her hands covering her mouth in sheer horror. Julian looked like he was going to vomit, the color completely drained from his face. He realized, in that exact, horrifying second, that the brother he had mocked, stolen from, and humiliated was now the absolute, undisputed owner of the company he worked for. I held his entire career, his entire future, in the palm of my hand. Derek, realizing he had just openly insulted the man who owned his company and controlled his salary, started stammering uncontrollably. "Mr. Hayes, I had absolutely no idea. I was just joking earlier. Julian is a great employee. We were just—" I held up a single finger, cutting Derek off instantly. "Save it, Derek," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a razor blade. I turned my gaze to my father. The man looked broken, small, and utterly defeated. "You were saying something about a silk purse, Arthur?" I asked quietly. They had absolutely nothing to say. For the first time in 28 years, they were entirely, completely speechless. "Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey." The aftermath of the gala was swift, brutal, and utterly devoid of mercy. When you operate a business, you cannot allow sentimentality to infect your corporate structure, especially when dealing with corruption. The very next Monday morning, I initiated a full, uncompromising forensic audit of the Vanguard Real Estate Group's regional office. The results were exactly as I suspected. Derek, the arrogant boss who had laughed in my face at the gala, was immediately terminated for gross financial mismanagement and embezzlement of corporate funds. We handed his files over to the state authorities, and he is currently facing a massive, career-ending lawsuit. Then came the matter of Julian. My brother's file was a masterpiece of corporate inefficiency. He had missed his sales quotas for 6 consecutive quarters. He had routinely expensed lavish lunches that had absolutely nothing to do with client acquisition. Under normal circumstances, any employee with his atrocious record would have been fired years ago. But I did not fire Julian. Firing him would give him an excuse to play the victim, to run crying to our parents and claim his evil, vindictive brother ruined his life out of petty spite. Instead, I instituted extreme, microscopic corporate oversight. His generous base salary was immediately slashed by 40%, transitioning him to a strictly commission-based structure. His expense account was permanently frozen. He was demoted from his inflated senior director title down to a junior sales associate, forced to report to a strict, no-nonsense manager who demanded daily activity logs and cold call quotas. Without the safety net of my stolen money, and without the protective corruption of his fired boss, Julian absolutely crumbled. He could not close a deal to save his life. The luxury BMW was repossessed quietly in the middle of the night. He was forced to move out of his expensive downtown apartment and crawl back into his childhood bedroom at our parents' house. But the house was no longer a sanctuary of wealth. Arthur and Eleanor, completely drained of their emergency funds from paying off Julian's gambling debts, and entirely cut off from my monthly utility subsidies, were drowning. To avoid bankruptcy and save the house from foreclosure, they were forced to take out a massive second mortgage. The entire inheritance they had spent decades bragging about, the college funds, the retirement accounts, all of it evaporated into thin air to pay for the consequences of the golden child they had worshipped. About 6 months after the gala, the universe arranged one final, pathetic encounter. I was shopping at a high-end, organic grocery store downtown, picking up ingredients for a dinner party I was hosting. I was standing in the produce aisle, inspecting some imported truffles, when I heard a familiar, hesitant voice. "Ethan?" I turned around. Standing there, holding a small plastic handbasket with a few cheap generic items in it, was Arthur. He looked terrible. He had aged 20 years in the span of 6 months. His shoulders were slumped, the arrogant posture he had carried his entire life completely shattered. He looked like a beaten, exhausted old man. He shuffled awkwardly toward me, forcing a weak, trembling smile. It is really good to see you, son. You look incredibly well. I saw the article about your company in the Wall Street Journal. We are very proud of you." I did not smile back. I just looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a clinical, detached observation. "Hello, Arthur." He flinched at the use of his first name. He nervously rubbed his hands together. "Listen, Ethan. Things have been really hard at home. Julian is struggling with the new corporate structure at work, and your mother cries almost every day. She misses you terribly. We all miss you. We were hoping. Maybe it is time to put all this childish anger behind us. Let bygones be bygones. Family is family, right? Maybe you could come over for a Thanksgiving dinner? We could sit down, discuss some things. Maybe you could give Julian some pointers on navigating the company." He was not apologizing. He was not taking an ounce of accountability for the 3 years of financial extortion, the public humiliation, or the psychological abuse. He was just trying to find a new, softer angle to pry open the vault. He was trying to use the emotional weight of a Thanksgiving dinner to leverage his way back into my wallet. I looked at the cheap groceries in his basket, and then I looked directly into his tired, desperate eyes. "I do not have a family, Arthur," I said, my voice calm, clear, and absolutely resolute. "I had an entire network of parasites who smiled at me while they drained my bank accounts to fund a lie. You made your choice very clear when you kicked me out of my own home to celebrate a man who was stealing from you. You chose your silk purse. Now you get to live with him. Ethan, please," Arthur begged, a tear actually forming in the corner of his eye. "We are drowning. We are going to lose the house. You have more money than God. You own the company. You could fix all of this with a single signature. It would not even affect your bottom line. Please, son." "You are right," I replied smoothly. "I could fix it with a single signature. But I absolutely refuse to. Enjoy your Thanksgiving." I turned my back on him, walked over to the checkout counter, and paid for my groceries. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, climbed into my Porsche, and drove away, leaving him standing alone in the aisle with his generic bread and his shattered illusions. I am sitting here today in my downtown penthouse, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows at the sprawling city below. The sun is setting, casting a brilliant, warm golden light over the skyscrapers. It is quiet here. It is peaceful. It is a sanctuary that I built entirely with my own 2 hands, my own relentless intellect, and my own unyielding boundaries. The journey to get to this specific point was not easy. When you finally cut off a highly toxic, narcissistic family system, the hardest part is not the dramatic confrontation. The hardest part is the deep, lingering silence that follows. For the first few months after I walked out of that house, I struggled with an immense, suffocating sense of guilt. Society conditions us to believe that blood is thicker than water, that you must unconditionally honor and support your parents no matter how brutally they treat you. We are taught that setting boundaries with family is an act of supreme selfishness. but I had to unlearn every single toxic lesson they had embedded in my brain. I had to realize that loyalty should never, ever require you to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. I realized that my parents did not love me. They loved the utility I provided. They loved the fact that I was a silent, compliant shock absorber for their own terrible life choices and Julian's endless failures. Healing is a deeply messy, non-linear process. I spent countless hours in professional therapy, actively unpacking decades of deeply rooted emotional neglect. I had to mourn the parents I never actually had. I had to accept the harsh, brutal reality that I was never going to get the genuine apology or the loving validation I had craved as a child. Arthur and Eleanor are fundamentally incapable of self-reflection. To apologize to me would require them to admit that their entire worldview, their entire worship of Julian, was a complete and utter fabrication. Narcissists will choose total financial and emotional destruction over admitting they were wrong. And that is exactly what they chose. Last I heard, the bank finally foreclosed on my childhood home. Arthur and Eleanor were forced to downsize to a small, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city. Julian, unable to handle the pressure of actual, measurable corporate work without a safety net, quit his job at Vanguard. He is currently working a minimum-wage retail job, constantly complaining to anyone who will listen about how the corporate world is rigged against him, completely oblivious to the irony that he had the ultimate advantage and squandered it entirely. They are living the exact life they earned. As for me, I am thriving in ways I never thought possible when I was locked in that dark bedroom. My company is an industry titan. I have surrounded myself with genuine, loyal friends who value my presence, not my credit limit. I have built a chosen family based on mutual respect, honesty, and shared ambition. I am sharing my story with you today not to brag about my wealth, and certainly not to gloat about my family's ultimate downfall. I am telling you this because I know, with absolute certainty, that there is someone watching this video right now who feels exactly like I did. You are the invisible one. You are the designated scapegoat. You are the one who constantly gives your time, your money, and your emotional energy to a family that only acknowledges you when they need something from you. You are constantly told that you are not good enough, that you are the difficult one, that you are the problem. I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are not the problem. You are the victim of a deeply broken system designed to exploit your inherent goodness. Your empathy is being weaponized against you. Do not wait for them to suddenly wake up and realize your incredible value. They never will, because seeing your value would mean acknowledging their own horrific behavior, and they are terrified of that mirror. Your inheritance is not their approval. Your inheritance is your own brilliant, unwritten future. Stop funding your own erasure. Stop buying tickets to a game where the rules are specifically designed to ensure you lose every single time. Set the boundary. Say the word no. Let them throw their tantrums. Let them run their smear campaigns. Let them call you selfish. Because the incredible, beautiful truth is that the moment you stop carrying their heavy, toxic baggage, you will finally have the energy to build your own empire. You can, and you will, be good enough for yourself. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard line in the sand and walk away from the people who were supposed to protect you? Share your story in the comments below. Let this be a safe space where we remind each other that we are not alone in this fight. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journey. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next one.